We are live now. Good morning. My name is Tsering Passang, and I'm the convener for today's online special discussion. Our cause very close to my heart. Revisiting the case for freedom of Tibet and a discussion on persecution of Muslims in East Turkistan. As part of my personal interest, I recently initiated this platform, Global Alliance for Tibet and Persecuted Minorities, with the core aim of raising the plight of Tibet, East Turkestan, and other minorities in China who are all being persecuted and suppressed by the Communist China. My brief background: I was born in a Tibetan refugee camp in Nepal and came to the UK nearly 24 years ago. I'm currently working for a London-based non-profit organization called Tibet Foundation as its director. As part of this discussion today, before I start, I want to say a slogan which we often use during our protest. When China lies, Tibetans die. In the light of the COVID-19, we have come up with new slogan. When China lies, British dies. When China lies, French dies. When China lies, American dies. When China lies, African dies. When China lies, Brazilian dies. And so on. Soon after the Communist China came to power in 1949, the Chinese troops marched into East Turkestan, China calls it Xinjiang, and occupied this peaceful Muslim nation. A year later, in 1950, China invaded Tibet, a peaceful Buddhist country, which has a vast area, almost the size of whole of Western Europe. After 9 years of concerted efforts to work with the Chinese government to avoid bloodshed on the Tibetan plateau, the Tibetan spiritual leader, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, could not work and did not see any hope in finding a peaceful means. And finally, he had to leave with no choice into exile for safety in India, where he sought political asylum. The Indian government, under the Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, has started granting humanitarian and other supports to help Tibetan refugees to rebuild their lives and education in India. The Tibetan government in exile was soon formed with the aim of garnering political support internationally for the independence of Tibet from China. Though India did not officially recognize Dharamsala-based Central Tibetan Administration as the Tibetan government in exile, but nonetheless, Delhi has allowed and continued to allow Tibetan refugees to engage in political protests and so on against Beijing to some extent, because India is a free and democratic country. Millions of people endured severe hardships and had died as the direct result of the illegal occupation of Tibet and East Turkestan by the Communist China. The suffering endured by the Tibetans and Uyghurs, as well as other nationalities, including the Falun Gong practitioners in China, is immeasurable. We now know the situation in Hong Kong and Taiwan. This is still continuing after 70 years of the communist rule in China. We also know President Xi Jinping has become even more powerful than the founder of the People's Republic of China, Mao Zedong. This morning, I'm very, very delighted to welcome and introduce an amazing panel of experts on Tibet, East Turkestan, and China. We have Professor Dibyesh Anand, China-Tibet expert from University of Westminster in London. We have Lhagyari Namgyal, member of Tibetan Parliament-in-exile, and she is joining us from Dharamsala in northern India. We have Rahima Mahmut, the UK director for Uyghur World Congress, and she is joining us from London. Then we have Dr. Shao Jiang, activist scholar, former prisoner of conscience, Tiananmen Square survivor. He's again joining us from London. And then finally, we have Chris Law, Member of Parliament, Shadow Spokesperson for International Development for his Scottish National Party in Westminster. And he's also the co-chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Tibet. And he's joining us from his sunny Scotland. And now first, and welcome everyone. And first, I would like to introduce Professor Dibyesh Anand. Professor Dibyesh Anand is the head of School of Social Sciences at the University of Westminster, London. He has a significant presence in popular media and a Google search for his name links to a range of forums, including comment articles in The Guardian, YouTube's videos, cited expert views in the newspapers of the USA, UK, China, India, Singapore, and blogs. Anand has held visiting positions at the University of California, Berkeley, Australian National University, Center for Bhutan Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and the Central University of Hyderabad, and delivered plenary talks, lectures, and seminar papers at institutions in USA, Europe, India, Bhutan, China, Russia, Singapore, and Australia. He has written numerous books, including Geopolitical Exotica, Tibet in Western Imagination, Tibet, a Victim of Geopolitics, and Hindu Nationalism in China, Hindu Nationalism in India, and the Politics of Fear. He is currently working on two different manuscripts, one on the disputed Himalayan border of China and India, and the other on competing perspectives on Tibetan history, present and future. So for today's discussion, revisiting the case for freedom of Tibet and a discussion on persecution of Muslims in East Turkistan, I welcome Professor Dibyesh Anand to make his opening remarks. Thank you, Dibyesh.
Thank you, Tsering, and thank you for inviting us here, and thank you for the long introduction. You could keep it short because we need more time, because I realize I'm supposed to work on 2 books, except I'm not working on it right now because I'm doing something else, but I'll come back to it. Now, in terms of the subject, and thanks for bringing us together. It's very rare. I've been working on issue of Tibet for more than 22 years now, and I don't remember ever in the past discussing about Tibet, but also discussing about China, or for that matter here. And Rahima has played a very crucial role, and so have you all, where in the UK and US, people now see connections between what's happening to Uyghur Muslims and what's happening to Tibetans, and also what's happening to people in Hong Kong and China in general. It's a good move to bring together speakers and people who have experienced oppression, and speakers who can speak about it on these regions, because there's something in common. And that commonality, of course, is the one who's occupied, the one who's oppressing, and in this case, it's the Chinese government. Right? Now, you have asked me to speak about the general context of what's happening. So we can focus on the general context in 2 ways. We can talk about what's happening with the concentration camps of Uyghurs. We can talk about the heavy set of repression that's going on in case of Tibetans, right? And now we can also talk about repression and the coming repression. And it's sad to say it's coming repression, because situation in Hong Kong is bad, but most of us know that it's going to get worse. And there's not much we can do about it at this point in time, right? So we can talk of that at present. And what's happening now in case of Uyghurs, Tibetans, Hong Kongese, and Chinese people is something that's new. What I would say is we should not see it as something new. It's a new phase of something that's already there. So the context I would say is of colonization, colonialism. So not communism per se, but colonialism. Then therefore, one way to understand what's happening in these parts is to understand it as the next phase of Chinese colonialism. And I say why I'm saying colonialism and not simply communism and not simply another phase of state building. Because when you look at how China has perceived its periphery, now remember, Tibet for Tibetans is homeland. It's not a periphery. But for China, it is periphery of the empire. For the British India in the past and now India, it's on the border, outside, right? So for Chinese government and for China, the empire is based in China, be it the Yuan or later the Qing, then the Republicans, and then of course now the Communists. Tibet has the periphery that they have to control. East Turkistan is a periphery that they have to control. And why do they need to control this? They need to control these places because they are in between other empires, like in between Chinese empire and the other empire. So it's periphery. It has been long, so we need to understand what's happening in terms of the historical context. Xinjiang, the new dominion in Chinese, right, is new dominion and it's not now. It has started 150 years ago. So it's part and parcel of Chinese state building, where state building in China is connected to empire, imperialism, colonialism. And once we acknowledge that what China is doing in case of East Turkestan or Tibet is full territorial control, political control, militarization, use of violence, use of police to control every aspect of life, paternalism. And paternalism is something which for Uyghurs would be, look, Uyghurs are such happy people. They like to sing and dance and and eat good food, and they're happy. And they're happy because of Chinese government. And Tibetans are happy people again because of Chinese government. So look at Chinese government. They have brought in railways, they have brought in roads, they have brought in infrastructure, they have built new things, right? And therefore therefore Tibetans and Uyghurs have to be grateful to China. That's paternalism. So that's paternalism and colonialism because Tibetans and Uyghurs have no option to say, I don't want your development. Right? The development is there in case of Uyghurs and Tibetans and others, but that development is not for empowerment of Uyghurs and Tibetans, but that development is to strengthen the links between Beijing and territory and homeland of Uyghurs and Tibetans. Right? So, best way to understand development is as a mechanism of control rather than something for empowerment. And that's the difference between normal inclusive development and colonial form of development. So what I would say is what's happening in case of China and with this parts of the world is around colonialism. That's a wider context. Now, we know there was colonialism 20 years earlier, even now. So what's new? What's happening today that's making it so acute? So what's happening today, as I said, is the next phase. And the next phase is under Xi Jinping, where China has the confidence that it can be a great power. It can be a great power that cannot be challenged. Now, of course, if you speak, whenever we speak to or when we listen to strategic experts from China and security experts, they know that it's a challenge. They know the main challenge comes from the US. And they have been preparing for it. And I remember 10 years ago on China-India border dispute, and I would work on that. And you talk of problems that China faces, and the approach always was, what the problem is in 10, 20 years' time, it's the US that will be a big challenger for us. So how to deal with it? So I think from under Xi Jinping, what has happened is there's a growing sense that China is almost there. It's not there, but almost there. So what prevents China from being there rather than almost there are these unstable regions within China that can create a problem, right? The unstable regions within China. Now, I'm not saying that Tibet is within China, it's occupied by China, right? But from Chinese government perspective, it's periphery that a potentially weak spot where the enemy, be it US, the West, or anyone else, can create problems for China. So what are those territories? Those territories are East Turkistan, those territories are Tibet, and of course that territory is Hong Kong. So what's under Xi Jinping is happening is strong 100% control over these territories so that no forces can ever challenge China. Right? So to understand repression over Uyghurs and Tibetans, we need to acknowledge that this is connected to Chinese colonialism, but it is also connected to the sense of insecurity that Chinese government has, that if they don't control these people 100% fully, brutally, in an authoritarian way, then it will become weak. So what's happening today, and I know it's bad what's happening to Uyghurs in a concentration camp. I mean, it's like what else can go wrong? But we know what can go wrong. And I am giving a very dire scenario, but that dire scenario is one of further genocide. If we think concentration camps are bad now, we know that concentration camps in case of Nazi Germany were followed by death camps, right? And were followed by full-fledged genocide. Now today, is it likely in case of China that there will be full-fledged genocide? It's not impossible because the structures are in place, right? So China has the technology for genocide. China has the control for genocide. China has the ideology for genocide. So what's preventing from full-fledged genocide is some level of international attention, right? International scrutiny. So where we become important, I would say, is to acknowledge and recognize that while things are bad, it can get worse. We should never think that it's so bad that it won't get worse. So what can get worse? It can get worse, so it can be full-fledged genocide. And China at this point in time, and maybe we can do that during question answer, of why the international community, and remember, international community is not England, is not US. We think of West as international community. It's a large number of non-Western countries that support China. So what can we, as a global alliance, as you brought us together, what can we do not only to put pressure on China from the West, but also non-Western countries? So we can maybe discuss that later. So I'll try to end this by saying that, so to understand what's happening today, we have to see the history and the history of colonization. And China is a colonial power. To understand what's happening today, we need to understand it as the next phase of Chinese colonization, but one that's fueled by both insecurity and confidence that China is almost there. And I'll end by saying that when you talk of the slogan, right, when China lies, Tibetans die, and Brazilians die and British die, I think you missed something, Tsering. And that is when China lies, Chinese die. Because the largest victims of Chinese authoritarian bordering on fascist system, right? The biggest victims are not only Tibetans or Uyghurs, that's the Chinese people. And that's Chinese people because they are the ones who are being lied to. They are the ones ultimately who are being controlled more than they can control us here, right? They are the ones who face the same scenario that Uyghurs and Tibetans have been facing if they open their mouth. And we know Shao Jiang case, and maybe he'll talk about it later, right? Therefore, it's very important that the global alliance, this is what good things you have done is, and others are doing it, is bring together solidarity with Uyghurs, Tibetans, Hong Kong people, people of China, and people outside, because what China poses is a way of governing that's completely authoritarian, colonial, and fascist. On that note, I'll end. Thank you.
Thank you, Dibyesh. I think it's perfect timing and it's very, very informative and sort of overview of the whole situation. So thank you very much, Dibyesh, and we'll come back later for more discussion. Now I would like to invite one of probably the youngest Tibetan member of parliament in exile, and her name is Lhagyari Namgyal. She is a Tibetan activist and, as I said earlier, a member of Tibetan Parliament-in-exile of the Central Tibetan Administration, based at Dharamsala in northern India. She served as the vice president and president of the Association of Former Tibetan Political Prisoners, Kuchusum Movement of Tibet, based in Dharamsala. And she has spoken widely in India as well as in the West, including in the UK a couple of years ago. So I invite Lhagyari Namgyal to make her opening remarks from Tibetan's viewpoint on this very, very important subject.
Your voice is breaking. I'm audible. Am I audible?
Yes.
Just tell everyone. I want to begin by wishing Rahima a very happy Eid Mubarak, and also Eid Mubarak to all my Muslim brothers and sisters around the world. We are speaking about TCP today. As Dibyesh said, we're talking about a new colonial imperialist, and that is something that we have to understand how, because I think when it comes to China and when it comes to colonialism, everyone around the world believes it's part of our history. It is something that is gone and does not exist. I believe if we wish to study colonialism, China is a new phase of it. And China has so far since 49, since the beginning of its existence, has engaged in colonial acquisition, forced colonial acquisition upon Tibet, East Turkistan, southern Mongolia, and many more, even Manchuria. And one thing that we have to understand is the fact that this forced narrative that China is coming out with when they are trying to connect Tibet, East Turkestan, southern Mongolia, and even Manchuria, historically, politically, and culturally, to China is basically what a colonial imperial does to legitimize, what they have done, to legitimize what they are doing, and basically act as the liberator and manipulate history in their favor. And this is something we have to understand. When it comes to Tibet, the world is aware. I am myself a daughter of a former political prisoner. My late father was imprisoned in 1959, and the direct result of the Chinese occupation of Tibet. And this is how I was the president of Kuchis Movement Association of Tibet. And when it comes to the Tibet movement, something that really bothers me at the moment is how the world is looking strictly in the queue of just the religious and cultural rights of Tibet. I believe it's much beyond. I believe it's about the basic human rights of Tibetans. I believe it's about the rights of Tibetans upon our own land, which is snatched by China. And these are something that should be questioned. And it's not just upon us, on other so-called minorities. This ethnic minority term is something that I have never approved of, and I believe I will never approve of. So, nonetheless, participate in this discussion because it's an important topic. China has taken over Tibet with lots of motives, and the most obvious one was their expansionist motive, because right after they were engaged in their own civil war with the Nationalist Party, they believed that now it shouldn't be just restricted to their own land, but beyond it. And when they were thinking that, they decided that it should be Tibet, it should be East Turkestan, Mongolia, Manchuria, everywhere. And that, I believe, was the first motive. And of course, the second motive and the most important thing is the mineral reserves, where Tibet is a very, very rich land. And apart from that, it's rich water resources. China, the water that they are so proud of, the Yangtze River, where their history has been so strongly linked, comes from Tibet. And that is one reason, I believe, not just Yangtze River, many rivers are the reason why Chinese Communist Party decided that they want to take over Tibet. And another important thing that I believe why they did it is the fear, the phobia that existed within the CCP that won a war at that time, that if they don't protect themselves at this moment, if they don't protect themselves from Tibet and East Turkestan and Mongolia, there could be a time when they will be taken over by somebody else. And therefore, the best way is to go and take over. For these reasons are, these are the reasons why I believe China took over Tibet, and this is the reason why China is not ready to leave Tibet or the other nations there, taking over. Of course, the world is currently talking about East Turkestan and the forced camp that they have come up with, the concentration camps. I've always believed that, the concentration camp is the reason why now the world knows more about East Turkestan. They should know more about it. But the reality is, this is something that has already happened to Tibet. And now it's happening to East Turkestan. The world right now knows very less about what is happening in Tibet. And the reason I believe is because China has reached an advanced and more systematic way of repression inside Tibet, where now the world is unable to get any information. The level of surveillance over Tibet is so strong that we are not getting information, and now the world is under the illusion that okay, everything is fine because there's nobody coming out and protesting. Okay, it's been a while since there's not been any self-immolation, even though the reality is it's been within Tibet since 2009. It's been more than 155. The world is thinking, okay, there's a silence at the moment. Perhaps things are better. So I believe we have to understand that East Turkestan will one day come to a stage where we are, where the world won't be able to get any evidence of what is happening inside East Turkestan or Mongolia. Is the world going to say everything is fine then? So I think we have to understand that this is the next level of repression, a next level of suppression that is taking place. And I believe because of the China COVID-19, the world knows what CCP is capable of. How it can lie to the world on its face despite its horrendous crime. And therefore, it's good to see at the moment in India where the Indians against the Chinese Communist Party, even if it's not in favor of Tibetans, they have realized what CCP is capable of and how dangerous CCP is for the world peace, for our own security. So I just don't want to speak a lot about what's happening inside Tibet because I believe those who are watching us understand what is happening. But we have to understand that the level of suppression inside Tibet has become so advanced that we should be more fearful than ever. And that is the reason why everyone needs to speak against China. And that is why we should do the right thing and we should be, so that we can protect ourselves. The free world can protect ourselves from this horrendous new phase of dictatorship of 21st century. I think I'll stop for now and I'll wait for more questions to come later. Thank you.
Thank you, Namgyal. This is very, very insightful from the Tibetan perspective, and I thank you for that. And we will have more discussion a little bit later. I now would like to invite Rahima, UK Director for Uyghur World Congress. Rahima is a Uyghur singer, human rights activist, and translator of the poignant prisoner memoir, The Land Drenched in Tears by Songyul Shenishab. She worked as a consultant and translator for the ITV documentary Undercover Inside China's Gulag, and translator for the latest BBC documentary China, A New World Order. And happy Eid, Rahima, and many congratulations for the award that you have just won, the BAFTA award for the latest documentary, the film. So yeah, Rahima, it's your platform now.
Thank you. Good morning to you all, and thank you very much for organizing this event. And I think it is very timely, and I believe it is very important. Yeah, just the film, actually, I worked just as a consultant and a translator, the Undercover China's Digital Gulag, part of the team. But it's maybe, for me, the best gift for Eid when I heard last night, because it is significant. It just shows that the world recognize the atrocity that this, because from historically, I'm sure my friends, Tibetan friends, also faced this. Because of the Chinese propaganda, the world had always been skeptical about what is happening to the Tibetan people and what is happening to the Uyghur people, also to the Chinese people. Often due to China's lies, and the world often didn't believe us or didn't want to believe us because it is not very convenient to believe us and take any actions. Uyghur situation, the Uyghurs suffered from persecution, discrimination, and then until these genocidal policies implemented actually since 2016 after the Chen Quanguo. I'm sure my Tibetan friends know him very well. He ruled Tibet before he was appointed to become party secretary in East Turkistan. So until then, people, the Uyghur, even the name of Uyghur, not many people know about. But of course, Tibet was very well known. The situation, due to various reasons, of course, Dalai Lama and also like Hollywood films. But the Uyghurs, one of the also reasons, I guess maybe people find it difficult to even pronounce the name. I think that maybe also one of the obstacles. People too worried to even use East Turkestan because worried to upset China. Even a lot of the scholars and activists, not non-Uyghur, often feel a bit. I say feel a bit worried to use East Turkestan because they want to brand as separatist or aligning with nationalists. But the problem is East Turkestan is itself before 1949. The latest independence of the East Turkestan was 1944, from 44 to 45. Even though it's not very long, the history, but we had that independence. We had that name, East Turkestan, and therefore for us Uyghurs, are very important to use the term East Turkestan, not Xinjiang. Although I don't mind to use Xinjiang because Xinjiang itself it gives away. Xin means new, Jiang means territory or border, and it just shows that the Xinjiang is not the historically part of China. But the world, I believe, often only when it is convenient, especially the government, only when it is convenient, then they like to acknowledge the truth, but otherwise act differently. Uyghur situation, I'm sure people, I hope I am right that majority of people already know what is happening to my country. So from my own experience, the year when I left, it was in 2000, I left my country, came as a student here in the UK. A student visa was the only way that I could leave China at that time. And the reason was because of the 1997, the Hulja massacre. The Hulja is the city where I was born, grew up. Because of this very terrible incident that I witnessed when I was visiting my family, my mother, 5th of February, one of the coldest days in winter, and many Uyghurs went on street peacefully demanding equality, religious freedom, cultural freedom, and also demanding a lot of Uyghur youth were arrested during 3 months crackdown and demanding their freedom. And even only recently, when I listened to the BBC World, when they mentioned 1997 Hulja massacre, they mentioned about this separatist or the nationalist group that took to the street to protest, and they losing the propaganda what the Chinese government has used at the time. And I know as I witnessed this event, I was in Hulja at the time. There is nothing ever mentioned about any independence or separatism or nationalism. The slogan was very, very simple. Cultural freedom, religious freedom, and free all those Uyghurs arbitrarily detained Uyghur religious groups. So just from this one example, I would like to just show that the lies often always is the winner for the Chinese government. And leaving the country because I could see the situation was deteriorating, and also because of the Chinese propaganda. The propaganda about the Uyghurs, how they are the violent, they are the nationalists, and they hate Chinese, and all sorts of language that was used on television and in their propaganda. The tension between the Uyghurs and the Chinese people became a very it came to a very kind of breaking point. I could see that at that time. And then in 2009, I'm sure people know this more than the Hulja massacre, that is Urumqi massacre, 5th of July 2009. That is actually the event, the peaceful event turned into violence. Is another turning point for the CCP to implement new rules, the law, extrajudicial killings, judicial arrests. And then in 2014, after she visited East Turkistan, and on the day when she left the region, there was an explosion, and that is a time we learned from the leaked document that he ordered show no mercy. So basically not going just after the people who are responsible for these attacks. Of course, we disagree. And also we always have questions about the accounts, the CCP's accounts about these attacks, because none of the incidents ever independently investigated or identified. So we don't know what was behind all these separate incidents. So 2014 was a turning point. Actually, in that year, they decided to use high-tech surveillance to control the the region. And the famous word from Chen Quanguo at one of the meetings, he said, it is okay to arrest 1,000 by mistake in order for one person to slip away. So that is the whole mentality behind placing over I believe of 3 million is a number that we believe who are incarcerated. And then 2016 they appointed Chen Quanguo, this ruthless evil man, and so following year in April 2017 the mass arrest started, first targeting the religious people, then intellectuals, university professors, most well-known singers, writers, poets, and philanthropists, many who built schools for Uyghurs who couldn't afford to go to the Chinese school or the state schools, and targeting also mainly the very young people. And we learned later from the survivors what is happening in these camps. I'm not going to go into too much in detail about these torture camps. In 2018, in August, the UN has first time openly criticized China and said that we believe up to 1 million Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities are incarcerated in camps. The immediate reaction from the Chinese representatives was no such thing. They completely denied. It was just like that the ambassador Andrew Marshall, he denied. How he denied it? It was exactly the same thing. 2 weeks later, after they were presented with the satellite images of these camps, big camps, and also expert reports, and then witness accounts, and the Chinese government said, well, these are the vocational training camps, and up until now they still call it re-education or vocational training. So the whole operational, the mentality itself, now we know, it's genocidal. They try to change the whole entire Uyghur population into the Han, because they feel the Uyghurs, they are, because they are different, and as my friend earlier said, because there is mistrust. They feel very insecure because they are the occupier of that land, and therefore they feel that if they didn't really tough and control the stability, then they would lose this control. Not only this, but also the genocidal, the psychology behind these perpetrators. And so I believe what is happening to my people at the moment, it is one of the maybe biggest genocide is happening or about to happen. So I want the world, to really take action. The reason, like Dibyesh said, the reason that they may be not taken this kind of full extermination process is because they knew that the world is watching. Just imagine if, we didn't have all these stories and the satellite images and the evidence, including the leaked, the classified documents, what would have happened? And up until now, we don't know what happened to those people. And we've seen those terrible scenes of, how they're transporting these prisoners from one place to another. We don't know where they're taking them. As far as we know from some internal sources, that up to 500,000 Uyghurs transferred to some notorious prisons in mainland China. And we also know there are many transported to forced labor in factories. We know over almost 500,000 Uyghur children are taken to this so-called loving kindergarten, which is also the children's camps, indoctrinating them to re-engineering them into one of kind. So all this is, the motive that is about to change the Uyghur to completely a different people, removing the religion, the language, and all the identity of who we are. So I think it is very important for us, Tibetans, Hong Kongers, and our Chinese friends come together, and we need do more such events to highlight what is happening, what is happening to all these people who are oppressed by the CCP. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rahima. That's amazing insight into the polling situation and the treatment by the communist Chinese authorities. You mentioned of the party leader Chen Cheng-kuo, and he was the party leader in Tibet, what they call it, Tibet Autonomous Region. He had the experience how to implement those ill policies, and now we have, and we are seeing the things happening in East Turkistan, as you rightly use the term genocide. I think about a decade or so ago, Dalai Lama used the term some form of cultural genocide was taking place in Tibet. So this is what we are seeing in East Turkestan. And as you said rightly, we have to work together and find a way to highlight the situations and bring political resolutions to this situation in our country. Thank you. We'll have more time for discussion a little bit later. Now, next speaker, I have a great pleasure to introduce, and a person who I personally admire highly for his courageous action. And Rahima and Shao Jiang and myself, we have, I think it was 2012, we participated in this China-sponsored book fair in London. So I've seen how he has, and he is doing it. And this is Dr. Shao Jiang, activist scholar. He is a former prisoner of conscience for his active role in 1989 pro-democracy movement. He is a committed activist scholar and lives in London and works in exile or in London. His academic interests focus on politics and media, social movement, democratization, feminism, law in the People's Republic of China and Hong Kong, autonomy and sovereignty and self-determination, international human rights mechanisms, comparative studies on development models and political institutions, theory and practice of civil society. His publications include Citizen Publications in China Before the Internet, that's Belgrave 2015. I now would like to invite Dr. Shao Jiang to speak on this very important topic.
Thank you, the Tsering Passang. Because my internet not very stable. If the stop, you tell me. Maybe you just show, because during conversation, I just dropped from this conversation. I think the problem, I use this BT, British Telecom. They cooperated the Huawei. You know the problem, this is the problem now. Actually, I send a lot of the freedom of information to Huawei and to the British Telegram. They never answer my question in detail. There's a lot of the problem. That is the UK. You can look at the UK-China relation. What it look like that. I just thank you for inviting me and share my comments and experience. So first, for Chinese view on Tibetan and East Turkistan issue, my first thought it was of the two Chinese. One is its name is Zhang Haitao, and the other is Wang Zhang. Zhang Haitao was a layoff worker in a state-owned company, writer for Chinese right movement website. He's serving 19 years jail term for writing articles criticizing crackdown of peaceful protest and forceful disappear during the brutal crackdown against the Uyghur on 5 July 2009. And the other his name is Wang Zhang. Is a poet and the screenwriter. Is passionate for Tibetan culture. He used Chinese character Tibet for his pen name. He was detained several times after writing concern about Tibetan self-determination and solidarity with Uyghur scholar Rahima Mahmut. On 20 May this year, he was again taken away by the police in Yunnan province, and his home was searched, and he was forcibly disappeared since then. His wife and children remain under surveillance, and Chinese human rights lawyers have been revoked their license, or sometimes it's detained after they represent Tibetan Uyghur prisoners of the country. And overseas research group, including Chinese PhD students, find satellite photos of the massive, heavily guarded building that could be used to hold the Uyghur and other Muslims in 2017. The problem is the Chinese Communist Party control all the Chinese media, textbook, and indoctrination since the Chinese kindergarten education. So many Chinese are not very clear what has happened in Tibetan, in East Turkistan, and that is a very challenge for us because we must use the different autonomy channel to push some alternative news and comments inside China, and it can show what happened in Tibetan, in East Turkistan, and South Mongolia, and other minority people they suffer. So I have been studying Tibetan and Eastern Turkestan issues for 20 years. I supported the right to self-determination of the Tibetan and the Uyghur peoples, and supported Tibetans and East Turkestan independence. That is because self-determination is a collective right and also the foundation of democracy. The Chinese Communist Party 70-year occupation and Sinicization have led to endangerment of the Tibetan and Uyghur culture. land and sources grabs have benefited the expansion of the Chinese Communist Party empire, result in worldwide crisis in human rights, environmental, democracy, and public health, and also caused authoritarian of the whole world. So, I think the Cherry gave one question: how about the Tibetan and East Turkestan people could challenge the Chinese Communist Party regime to achieve their ultimate goals? I understand correctly, independence is a means and approach guarantee the ultimate goals such as liberty, equality, happiness, peace for all and everyone. And the Tibetan and the Uyghurs have much experience over decades fighting for the freedom and protest the CCP, forced land grab, language policy, forced resettlement and birth control policy, and miscarriage of justice inside and outside the exile group in Tibetan and Uyghur group protested and boycott the Beijing Olympic and you mentioned the London Fair propaganda and forced Tibetan and Uyghur and other prisons laborers. I think it's quite an effect using international law and domestic law in a democratic country, hold the Chinese official accountable for human rights violation. I have humble suggestion on Tibetan and East Turkestan independent movement. It's a good leverage to continue to push for global human rights law, including Magnitsky Act in UK Parliament, to hold Chinese officials accountable, use different media and publicize the Chinese Communist Party economy policies and practices, Tibetan and East Turkestan, as well as bring this alternative version and news comments in Chinese, and they help the Chinese understand this situation. And I think also is need standing in solidarity with Hong Kong people and Hong Kong movement enact the social movement such as Black Matter Left and the labor movement, environment movement, and let's know this movement, they all participate, understand Tibetan and Eastern Turkestan issue. I think maybe it's very important that this also it should be carried out. We maybe independently invite the nation into political, business, media, and academic affairs, and their role in relationship between UK and China, including politician rules such as Tony Blair, David Cameron, and state organs rules such as Home Office, Foreign Office, organizations such as China-Britain Business Council, 48 Group Club, British Council, and universities such as Oxford, Cambridge, LSE, and companies and banks such as British Telecom, I just mentioned, HSBC, Standard Chartered Bank, Thames Water, we drink this water in London. Yeah, and what is the problem is relation with the Chinese society and free speech chain, how to undermine free speech and free expression, and how to damage the public interest, violate the right to protest and the right to privacy in UK, even you are UK citizenship. The UK 70 years China policy is based on free speech, free range, and interest in sharing. We need to reflect relation shape and change the global political economic system, and the rise of the global authoritarianism with the Chinese characteristics. The strategy of the Tibetan and the Eastern Turkestan independent movement also need to consider and deal with this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Shao Jiang. That's amazing, and will save your suggestion independence for Tibet a good leverage for human rights, free speech, and so on later for discussion. I will be inviting Namgyal Dolker and Rahima on the independence question later on. So thank you very much, Shao Jiang. And finally, we have this amazing person from Scotland, Chris Law, Member of Parliament, shadow spokesperson for international development for his Scottish National Party. He has been a member of Parliament for Dundee West in Scotland since 2015. Currently, he undertakes the role of shadow spokesperson, as I said, for the international development for his Scottish National Party in Westminster in London. And he's also a co-chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Tibet in Westminster, a voice for Tibetan issue in the UK Parliament. And I know Chris has supported and supports many other causes as well. So now I would like to invite Chris to speak on this very, very important subject.
Thank you very much, and it's a real privilege to be invited here to speak today, and I feel the least qualified to speak on the issues of both Tibet and the Uyghur, given the fact I'm from Scotland and the West. However, I'm deeply passionate and deeply honoured to have the opportunity to speak. I also want to say thank you to the contributors so far, because I'm speaking from real great depth of their experiences and obviously from their homeland. And as someone who's from Scotland, I identify particularly with what Rahima said about the language of East Turkistan or Xinjiang. Scotland has been often called North Britain, and I'm regularly labelled as a separatist, so I would just put on the record now I'm very proud to be a separatist. And independence in Scotland now stands at 54%, support through peaceful, democratic and legitimate debate and discussion. The last point I want to talk about really is about, before I move to the main part, is about silence. That today's silence is not an option. It's an option for other people's complicity to take charge of actions which includes against them all. And as a person who is now currently an MP, my journey to become a politician actually started in Tibet. Because almost 30 years ago I visited Dharamsala as a young person who was travelling, and I had the great privilege to spend a fortnight there and learn a lot about the Tibet movement and the plight of the Tibetan people. What I want to talk about today, I think, for those who are listening and who want to know more about the parallels between Tibet and the Uyghurs in East Turkestan, there's so much information there which I'm really grateful for that's being published and can be independently verified with China, and I hope people get access to it. There's one thing that's clear, Tibet has been a testing ground for the Chinese Communist Party's repressive policies are now being employed in even larger scale against the Uyghurs. And Chinese people were incentivized to live and work in Tibet where they became dominant people. Tibetan nomads were forcibly removed from prized land and relocated to socialist urban centres. And there is a link here, a direct link, a political link, which is the key connection between Tibet and the Uyghur region, is Chen Guanggu, who was appointed as party secretary of Tibet's Autonomous Region in 2011, and who's now the party secretary of Xinjiang Autonomous Region. After the uprising in 2008 in Tibet, Chen's appointment which came through after basically allowed the Communist Party of China to never let protests of this scale happen again. And as we've already heard about the blanket surveillance and heavy police presence in Tibet, this is what's happening, not only just in the Uyghur region, but also elsewhere, as we hear regularly reports from Hong Kong. I just saw a report this morning on the BBC website about Hong Kong now speaking the arrests of fleeing students. These are students who are not in Chinese mainland or in the periphery. These are students or actually here in the UK, to give one area of example. So what I want to turn to really now is about Chinese foreign policy, because the lessons that we can learn is that this isn't just happening in mainland China, this is an expansion throughout our planet and throughout other nations and what other great influence. China is going through the process of moving from being a silent watcher to participating, and finally to revise and reforming the rules-based international trade system. Critics have stated that China intends to subvert and reform the international system by promoting the alternative version of human rights, which stresses economic development at the cost of universality, individual civil and political freedom. And an example, perhaps, would be the Asian Declaration of 2017, which stated, and I quote, that each country should choose a human rights development path or guarantee model that suits its specific conditions. And that was in a forum hosted by Xi Jinping, which involved more than 300 representatives from 70 countries. And why is that important? Well, I'll give you an example. The Belt and Road Initiative. Western policy, on one hand, Chinese investment, on the other, requires the leverage for investment in China, which could encourage countries to join Chinese efforts to undermine certain aspects of the rules-based international system, and could weaken the alliances and partnerships that help to preserve international peace and prosperity. I've had the honour to meet with the Dalai Lama more recently and regularly to see him at the Tibetan administration. And he made it clear that despite the colonisation started in Tibet, he actually said in his own words, one road leads to hundreds of roads in Tibet now. Routes and one railway is leading to 3 to 4 railways. One airport led to sub-airports and 6 military airfields. Conveniently, all these roads, railways and airports are connected to haulage natural resources and minerals for them. So I'm echoing what we've already heard this morning. I think what's important is the UK's policy towards China. In a speech in 2015, George Osborne, who's the Chancellor of the UK government at the time, began by saying at the Shanghai Stock Exchange, this was a creation of a golden decade for the UK-China relationship. Since Xi Jinping's visit to the UK later that year, British and Chinese governments continued to refer to the existence of a golden era in UK-China relations. And during a visit to Asia in 2018, Prime Minister of the time, Theresa May, said that she and President Xi are committed to intensify the golden era. Now, the aim for UK-China, the UK strategy in China has been to build a deeper partnership with China, working more closely together to address global challenges. Now, that hasn't won without criticism. I would say very much has not been transparent. Critics have argued that official UK policies are undoubtedly negative in pursuit of the holistic golden era. For example, the 2015 National Security and Strategic Defence and Security Review addressed China primarily on economic terms, and it was not mentioned alongside Russia in section dealing with states that ignore international norms. The report also was criticised for a range of fundamental concerns including human rights, the dumping of industrial products, cyber espionage, and the militarising of South seas. And more recently, in his report on House Legislation, Foreign Affairs Access to International Development, it stated that the belief was that the closer to the norm, where there's less said about China and more about other places when it comes to talking about human rights and about criticisms of China. What I want to make a point to stress here is we need as parliamentarians to be vigilant on this and to demand more scrutiny from the UK government. What I would say, however, in the last year, changes have come about, and that's positive news. In the past year, there's been significant change in tone in China among UK politicians, and in recent months, this has been reflected in UK government policy. And there's a myriad of reasons for this. Within the Conservative Party is a broad coalition of MPs regarded as what we would call the People's Republic of China skeptic, including pro-American MPs who fear the US-UK trade deal could be threatened unless Britain matches President Trump's hostility to China. There are, of course, those who are human rights advocates concerned about treatment of Uyghur Muslims. There's liberal internationalists who swear by China's challenge to global rules-based order. And since the general election in December 2019, there are new MPs in the north of England anxious about factories damaged by China's anti-competitive practices. However, Beijing's imposition of the national security law in Hong Kong has inflamed diplomatic relations between the UK and China. Prime Minister Boris Johnson telling the House of Commons the enactment and imposition of this national security law constitutes a clear and serious breach of the Sino-British Joint Declaration. This has resulted in the UK pledging to offer 3 million Hong Kong residents a chance to settle in the UK, and the Chinese government accused the UK of making irresponsible remarks and brutal meddling. With concerns, the Chinese government could use Huawei, I'm addressing the point by Big T on this, could use Huawei to spy on foreign countries. The UK government also ordered the removal of all Huawei kit from 5G networks by 2027 and ban mobile providers from buying new Huawei 5G equipment by the end of this year. Chinese ambassador has responded by saying, if you want to make China a hostile country, you will have to bear the consequences. That, to me, is an open threat. The UK government, therefore, has become more vocal about the treatment of the Uyghur minority in East Turkistan, and the Foreign Secretary recently accused China of gross and egregious abuses and decided to suspend extradition treaty with China. I would fully, however, expect China to be an issue of government's foreign policy in the coming months, and obviously myself and my colleagues will be speaking up as much as possible about this, and it's likely to be debated in Parliament as well. And so for those of you who can bring forward information and evidence for me to use, and for my colleagues, I would welcome that. I'd also say that there has been a change in tone and strategy towards China, which provides also an opportunity to reassess policy in Tibet and reassert the case for Tibetan freedom. Britain long considered Tibet to be a state and maintained bilateral relations until quite recently. And sadly, in 2008, under the Labour government at the time, Britain's position stopped recognising Chinese sovereignty over Tibet, and as a result, swept away a relationship that held China to account, and that's deeply disappointing. Conscious of the time, so I'll try and move forward just a little bit. I would say the other changes today, I suppose, is the UK sent a strong message to its commitments to Hong Kong. It should also return its long-standing position of Tibet's legal status derived from its treaties with Tibet. This is perhaps the single best tool Britain can offer Tibetan people in their struggle for their rights. And I say that knowing the context that, of course, Tibetan's history has been rewritten officially as being part of China over the last 1,000 years, which of course is not the case. It's an independent nation state. Over the past decade, nearly 3 times the number of Chinese government delegations claiming to represent Tibet have visited Western countries compared to the number of Western delegations allowed into Tibet. Tibet's the only region of China that foreign journalists need special permission to enter. Last year, Tim Lotney's a Conservative politician and co-chair of the Female Party People of Tibet, introduced the Tibet Reciprocal Access Bill, mirroring the Reciprocity Act in the US. It requires the UK government to report annually on restrictions on access by UK nationals to Tibet in comparison with other regions of China, and to make provision to deny persons involved in imposing such restrictions permissions into the UK. It was introduced last month. With the UK government announcing its first sanctions under the new Magnitsky-style sanctions regime, targeting those who have been involved in some of the gravest human rights violations and abuses around the world, there have been calls to see representatives of the Chinese regime included due to the human rights abuses both in Tibet and with the Uyghurs. The increased focus has been encouraging. There's been cross-party pressure in the UK coming from all parties, which includes Tim Lawton from the Conservatives, myself and Patrick Grady from the SNP, Kerry McCarthy from Labour, and Jim Shannon from the Democratic Unionist Party. I think it's key here to say, given the short time that I've left, if the UK is willing to take a stand on honouring its commitment to the people of Hong Kong, it should also address why it's changed policy in Tibet in 2008 and honour the legally binding Shumla Convention in respect to Tibet. The likelihood of increased focus on debate in China provides a space and platform for parliamentarians to raise this and push forward with campaigning in the coming months. And I'll finish on one last thing I want to bring to attention. Rahima and I shared a platform just a few weeks ago with regards to the human rights, the bars, human rights community of England and Wales, which published a report outlining the responsibilities of states, which includes the UK, under international law to Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims in Xinjiang, China. China has responsibilities under international law, has 6 treaties under which it has to comply. The UK government sits on the Security Council, as does China. So pressure should be brought to bear not only with China itself, but also by other nation states in doing so. And as I said at the beginning of this, silence is no longer an option. The consequences, sadly, is that history repeats itself. And the fact that there's more than 1 million Uyghurs in concentration camps in China is a great reminder of the things that we were aware of in mainland Europe in the 1930s and 40s. Just last to say, the report has referred to all responsibilities to the question of advisory options sought from the International Court of Justice. It urges the government of China to invite mandate holders to conduct independent missions to monitor civil and political rights. It calls upon the UN Rights Council to urgently take all appropriate measures to monitor Chinese human rights practices. An impartial and independent United Nations mechanism to report annually in China and apply Magnitsky-style sanctions. The threat of authoritarianism in the manner that we have seen both in Tibet and with the Uyghur and in Hong Kong and in other areas in mainland China, and it's a threat to all of us around the world. And the pandemic, if nothing else, reminds us how closely connected we are to this group. So I just want to finish by saying I'm with everyone here who's already spoken, and I will be speaking loudly and clearly in Parliament.
Thank you, Chris Law. That's amazing. And you have spoke a lot for the rights of the Tibetan people, as well as the Uyghurs, Muslims in East Turkistan, and other people in Hong Kong, and so on. I think we can see that you can speak from your heart. And this is much, much appreciated. Thank you. Originally, we planned to finish by 11:15, but because we haven't raised any questions, so we have many questions, but what I will do is we will try to extend this session for another 15 minutes or maximum 20 minutes, and I'll ask a few questions and any final conclusion remarks from the panels. Now, first of all, I would like to ask this question to Dibyesh, Professor Dibyesh Anand. Can the current global crisis linked to China and its aggressive policies be explained in terms of revisionism and expansionism? If it is so, can we confront this impending crisis without revisiting the issue of freedom of Tibet, which is the first victim of Chinese expansionism? Dibyesh? I think your speaker needs to be unmuted. Okay.
Yeah, I'll keep it very brief. You're right. I mean, I said this current phase of Chinese expansionism, and that's how China has been seen by many, is connected to the next phase of Chinese colonization. So there's a connection between internal and external. And what, of course, the risk for China is that more and more people outside China are becoming aware of how aggressive China is, right? So we can connect. The challenge we face, and I say we as progressives, so there are those who hate China, they're xenophobes, and they want to bring down China, right? I mean, that's not the politics I'm interested in. I'm interested in a progressive critique and challenge of China, because China is far right even while being left. That's how it is, right? So the problem we face, of course, is that more China grows, you have got, let's say, Donald Trump and American right being aware. And then how can, let's say, Chris law or our kind of politics align with it? And we have to work with it. So we have to be aware that there's a section of left in the West that will not criticize China, even despite all human rights abuse, simply because it's being opposed by the right. And that has to be challenged, because we on the left and we who are progressive have to make a case that if you believe in equal rights for all, which we do, then you cannot not support Tibetans, you cannot not support Uyghurs, you cannot not support Hong Kong people, despite the fact that China is a communist state. So that's one part. But something in favor of China, which we have to be aware of, is it has immense public diplomacy strategy, which is working because even with Uyghurs, most Muslim countries have not only kept quiet, but they've actually sided with China. So, you can talk to Rahima and Uyghur Congress. World Uyghur Congress faces a challenge that whatever limited recognition and support it gets is mostly in the West. And that falls into the trap of Chinese government to say that, oh, this is anti-China led by West. So this is a problem. So the way, of course, I understand it, you cannot challenge Chinese expansionism until unless you recognize the root of the problem. The root of the problem is Chinese colonization in this context. And once you recognize, you cannot not be supportive of freedom for Tibet, freedom for Uyghurs, and freedom for whoever, including in China, wants freedom from an authoritarian structure. But I said, for me, there is a danger which we face, which is where Donald Trump or Narendra Modi of India, they might start becoming more and more anti-China and claim that they're going to rescue the world from China. They're not going to rescue the world because they are themselves a problem. The way I see it, the world is facing a real crisis in terms of far-right authoritarian leaders, and I'm using Xi Jinping as far-right authoritarian leader, by the way, right? Far-right authoritarian leader like Erdogan, Modi, Trump, Bolsonaro, and Xi Jinping is included that, becoming very powerful, and then leading to a problem where you are forced to select between one or the other. So the way I see it, support for Tibetans and Uyghurs, oppose Chinese authoritarianism, but not fall into the trap set by Trump's kind of figure, which is completely opposite of what the ideas of freedom and human rights should be.
Thank you, Dibyesh. Does anybody want to make remarks or on this question? Oh, sorry about that. Okay. Before I ask possibly the final question to Rahima and Namgyal, do anybody want to want to come in on this question, which I just asked to Dibyesh? Okay, Chris.
Yes, I echo what Dibyesh said about the two issues. First of all, we want to be friends of the people of China. We are friends of the people of China, and we stand in solidarity with the people of China. The issue is not the people of China. The issue is the government of the day and its repressive policies against peoples within China. I remember the echo sentiment where about silence, where if you turn away, it may well be you that come after next. And I make this as a because if you're not Tibetan, why should it bother me? If I'm not Uyghur, why should I care? If I'm not in Hong Kong, what does it matter? But it will only be a matter of time before that repressive authoritarian regime comes against you. The point that we stand in solidarity. The second point I would just add, in which I completely agree with you, Dibyesh, is that we shouldn't get, there has been a silence on the left of the argument towards the issues of human rights with regards to Tibet and Uyghur and elsewhere. And I think that's largely to do with I'm not entirely certain why that has been, but we should go into the roots of some of the other reasons why people are advocating the issues of human rights, which are important. We're using it because it ends to do with trade and trade only. Human rights are enshrined under the UN Charter of Human Rights. One of the first principles in human rights, of course, is the right of self-determination. It is the right of people to have free speech and to enjoy their lives in the way they can express themselves. And if they wish to determine their own futures, then that should be a choice for them and not a choice for others to inherit that. So I would share in that point in that respect. I would just say that we should not be turning away from any human rights anywhere. And I think the problem with UK foreign policy is it has often been expedient and duplicitous. In other words, TikTok and mantle human rights in one part of the world and ignored it elsewhere. And what we need to see more of in the international community, and I'm not just talking about the UK, is a comprehensive approach to human rights all over the world, so that we talk with one voice. And that's what brings that solidarity of people together, where the human rights are acknowledged and they're reflected by people's voices all over.
Thank you very much, Chris. I know we are experiencing some difficulties with connection with Shao Jiang somehow. We have been seeing this morning. Shao Jiang has earlier made a suggestion for Tibetans and Uyghurs, people, that they consider independence for Tibet and is independence for East Turkistan and so on, which could be a good leverage for human rights, free speech, etc. And my question now for both of you, Rahima and Namgyal Dolker, in the light of COVID-19 pandemic and the shift on geopolitics, does this new situation present a better opportunity for Tibetans, Uyghurs and Uyghurs freedom struggle movement? If so, what and how do you envisage going forward? Who wants to go first?
Okay, I can go first.
Great, thank you.
This COVID-19 has been a challenge for everyone across the world. However, it has brought in a different light to the movements, vis-a-vis China. So it's not just Tibet, the Uyghur, everyone else who have been trying to advocate around the world for our causes. I believe, it is much easier now for us to inform the world about how negatively powerful China can be because of their lack of accountability, vis-a-vis COVID-19. It's easier for us. However, unlike past times where we could come out on the street, do so many different kind of advocacies, right now there is a definite challenge for us. However, there is social media, one platform where we can always try and continue and try and mobilize the international community, the world leaders in favor of our movement. One thing that I wanted to add in that is linked to what you've said about the Tibetan freedom movement and the freedom movement of Uyghur. I believe about the Uyghur, Rahima should be the perfect person to speak about it. For the Tibetan freedom movement, I would like to say that the voice of Tibetan independence movement has died, especially around the period of Deng Xiaoping, where the world and our own community had a hope that now China is becoming liberal because of its political stance or because of its economic stance, which was not a strict communist, but they were trying to go capitalist. However, I would like to say that that is not the case anymore. We don't continue to have Hu Yaobang next to Deng Xiaoping anymore. We now been having worse and worse leader. Look at the leadership of PRC at the moment. We are talking about Xi Jinping, this new dictator who will remain the dictatorial leadership until he dies. I believe the way he has been working, I don't think there is a space for us to have a dialogue. I believe there can only be a dialogue where there is a level of trust between the two people engaged in the dialogue. There is a level of ethics, a value that both of the people engaged in the dialogue should possess. And this, I believe, is lacking from the side of China, Chinese communist regime. And I've always said, and I've like honestly truly believed that what I want for not just Tibet, but for the Uyghurs, Southern Mongolia, is free and independent and democratic countries. And I would be more than happy to have a free and democratic China and live happily ever after, if there is such thing, with China as a very good neighbor. And this is something that I see for the future of Tibet, for the future of China, for the future of East Turkestan, that we live together as good neighbors who understand each other, who respect each other as equal human beings. So this is something that I believe should hold for the future of all of us, future of Tibet, for East Turkestan and Southern Mongolia. It's I believe, rather sad that we don't have much voice for Southern Mongolia with us these days, which we should. And we should also have voices of Manchus with us, because history is an evidence that all of us are and have been independent nation, and we are not Han Chinese. What the Han Chinese want for themselves and for their future as free and democratic country is their right, and I support that right. So this is something that I feel is important. There are people who believe that it's not a pragmatic solution. I believe it's the best pragmatic solution that our movements hold at the moment. Because we know that without an independent Tibet, without an independent Turkestan, without an independent Southern Mongolia, there won't be a peace that Asia and the world at large needs at the moment. So yes, I think I tried to answer for both of your earlier questions. I'm not sure if I was audible in between. I was losing my voice, but hopefully you heard me and Lisa heard me.
Yes, Namgyal, we did hear you. You did say free and independent Tibet and would like to be a good neighbor with democratic China. Thank you very much. Now over to Rahima.
Okay, thank you very much, Namgyal. I mean, you spoke what I, the heart of the Uyghurs. China has been using this immunity, the sovereignty, using it against the Uyghurs, the Tibetans, and the Mongolians. Whenever there is atrocities, it's always said this is an internal affair, so the other countries shouldn't really get involved. But even the Uyghurs, since 1949, especially after 1955, when Communist Party declared Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, and there was a illusion that a lot of Uyghurs believed that we can live a very happy life under this, communist regime which advocates sort of so-called equality and so on. But we can see from the history since 1949 up until now, disasters never ended, one after another. From 58 rightist movement, the Cultural Revolution in the 60s, and then what we're facing, especially past for almost 4 years now, and Uyghurs are fighting for its existence. Not the independence, but the existence, and just fighting to speak our own language, practice our religion, and our cultural rights. Every basic rights that we have as human, as people, taken away from us. And under this kind of situation, the trust is completely now broken. I remember one of the scholars who visited the region last year, and she told me that in the past, when I spoke to many Uyghurs, they even quietly, they wouldn't mention independence. They complain about the mistreatment, but no one would mention independence. But now, these she said 90%. Even the Uyghurs who worked within the government sectors who supported the Chinese CCP's policies, and now they are saying there is the only way that we can survive, we can live as a human being with the basic rights, is that we have to have our own independence. And the world must see we are facing a genocide at the moment. And I believe that the international community, especially the governments, Western governments, hold these values that the human rights above all, such values should now shouldn't be, can I say, too worried to support the independence of Tibet, independence of the Uyghurs. It's the history taught us. And in order to believe someone, even just a friend, you have to look at their past, how they behave. Over the last more than 70 years, the behavior of the CCP, and I don't need to go into detail, we all can see. And of course, you mentioned about COVID, yes, that has exposed the inconsistency and the lies of the CCP. Not only the COVID, but I think Hong Kong, what is happening in Hong Kong also, I believe, opens the eyes of the West, how they completely disregard the treaty, the agreements, and all this can tell us what the CCP is capable of. And I also feel the Chinese people, they also been suffering from this suffocating regime, and have been very quiet because they believe that the lifting out from poverty and becoming rich can bring them happiness. It's not. When you have a dictator like that, the dictator has the power anytime take away your wealth, can froze your assets, and it can brand you as in any way. So therefore, I think I completely agree with my friend that the best way forward, or the only way for the Uyghurs and Tibetans and the Mongolians and other ethnic people is that having our own independence and then live happily with China only when they are become a democratic country. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Rahima, for your answer to this, and thank you, all of you. Dibyesh.
Yeah, you need to unmute.
Oh, sorry. I was excited to thank you. Thank you, all of you, Professor Dibyesh Anand, Lhagyari Namgyal Doga, Rahima Mahmut, Dr. Shao Jiang, and Chris Low, for your participation and sharing your experience, expertise, knowledge for our viewers. And this first an important debate revisiting the case for freedom of Tibet and a discussion on persecution of Muslims in East Turkistan, organized by the Global Alliance for Tibet and Persecuted Minorities, a new platform. And we look forward to working and inviting you more again in the future. Now, if I may conclude in the next 30 seconds or maximum of 1 minute, I think it is time we say to the Chinese dictators in Beijing, enough is enough. It is also time we push back China and stop their global expansionism dreams. Say no to the one belt, one road. We all now know that after Chinese leaders lied about the COVID-19, Millions of people around the world contracted with the China virus, and over 500,000 people have died from this pandemic. These deaths could have been prevented had the Chinese leaders were honest and upfront about the origin of this deadly virus. The latest figures show that over 16 million people have contracted the China virus, and nearly 700,000 people have now died worldwide. How many more people, how many more Chinese, how many more Americans, how many more Indians, how many more Africans, how many more British, how many more Latin Americans had to die due to the lies and the cover-ups by the Chinese dictatorial leadership? Enough is enough. We will come back again and we will organize such more events, and we will expose the dirty work, the lies by the Communist Party of China. Thank you once again, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.